Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining my presentation. My name is Vinod Vincent. I'm an assistant professor of management at Clayton State University, which is located in the Atlanta, Georgia area. So the title of my presentation is The Impact of Cognitive Style on Entrepreneurship, a Dual Process View. So I'd like to give you an overview or an introduction to my paper. An entrepreneur's cognitive style has a significant impact on the entrepreneurship process. Okay, so the cognitive style is an individual's inherent tendency to use either an intuitive or an analytical approach to information processing and decision making. Okay, so some people tend to be intuitive, and others tend to be more analytical in their approach to processing information and making decisions. Okay, and the entrepreneurship process is the process where entrepreneurs identify and exploit entrepreneurial opportunities. Okay, so the process has two main steps. Okay, the first phase is called opportunity exploration. Okay, that's the initial stage of entrepreneurship where the entrepreneur identifies and decides on an entrepreneurial venture. And then the second phase of the process is called opportunity exploitation, okay, where the entrepreneur starts and operates the actual business, okay. So the first stage of the process is, identifying and deciding on an opportunity, and the second stage of the process where you actually, start the business, manage the resources, and things like that, okay. And for enterprise or any type of business to be successful, both of these functions are crucial. Okay, so some have argued that an intuitive cognitive style can be effective during the opportunity exploration phase, which is the initial stage of the entrepreneurship process. Okay, and some others have argued that an analytical style will be better suited for opportunity exploitation. Okay, but there is a lack of consensus as to what type of entrepreneur, in terms of their cognitive style, will be a more successful entrepreneur. Okay, so to that, to that point, the purpose of this paper is to integrate research from entrepreneurship and cognition to better understand the association between entrepreneur cognitive style and entrepreneurial success. Okay, and I'm going to look through the lens of dual process theory, which I would explain to you a little bit later, and present a model that theorizes the impact of cognitive style on entrepreneurial success. Okay, so let me start off by talking a little bit more about cognitive style. Okay, so what is cognitive style? Cognitive style refers to individual differences in information processing and decision making. Okay, and then it's also defined as a higher order heuristic that individuals use when they process and resolve a problem. Okay, and there are two different types of cognitive styles, right? One is an intuitive cognitive style, and the other is an analytical cognitive style. All right. Now, intuition is often defined as an unconscious process that's effectively charged and that is fast and that makes holistic associations. Okay, and on the other hand, analysis is a more conscious, it's a very deliberate process, right? And it's based on logical inference, and compared to intuition, is a relatively slower process. Okay, now, intuitive people, they tend to rely more on their gut feeling. Okay, so most of their decisions, or a majority of their decisions, are based on how they feel about it, and they're typically the big picture oriented people. Okay, and analytical people, they rely more on logical reasoning, right, and they're more detail oriented. So some characteristics of cognitive style, or some things to know about cognitive style. cognitive style does not change over time, and individuals generally have a preference to use either an intuitive or analytical style to make decisions. Okay, and what research has found is that cognitive style has an impact on how individuals make decisions, and also on the outcomes of those decisions. So when considering the impact of cognitive style on decision making, it's important to distinguish between two prevailing views on cognitive information processing. Okay, one view is called the unitary view, which considers intuition and analysis to be opposite ends of a single continuum. Okay, so on one end of the spectrum is pure intuition, where the decision is unjustifiable, inexpressible, and fast, and on the other end is pure analysis, where the decision is justifiable, expressible, and slow. Okay, and typically a human judgment will fall somewhere along the continuum depending on the inherent cognitive decision style of the individual as well as the properties of the task. Okay. And the other view relating to cognitive information processing is the dual process view. Okay, so the dual process view considers intuition and analysis to be two distinct, independent constructs. Okay, so in contrast to the unitary view, according to the dual process view, intuition and analysis are independent constructs that they interact with each other, sometimes sequentially, one system followed by the other, and sometimes simultaneously, where both systems compete at the same time. Okay, and the relative dominance of one system over the other is influenced typically by individual differences in cognitive style, as well as situational factors. Okay. Now, an important thing to know about the dual process view is that because the two systems are independent, unlike the unitary view, an individual can be high or low in one or both constructs. Okay. Now, in recent research, dual process view is more widely accepted, and therefore, in my paper, I will look at the cognitive process through the lens of dual process theory. Okay. So, like I mentioned, according to dual process theory, it's possible for an individual to, at the same time, be both intuitive and analytical. Okay, and when an individual is high on both intuition and analysis, we call it cognitive versatility. Okay, so a person who is high on both intuitive and analytical decision-making ability is called cognitively versatile. So, an individual's preference or their inherent cognitive style is not always the same as the actual decision-making approach they use given a situation. Okay, so while the cognitive style of an individual is a preference to use either an intuitive or an analytical approach to information processing and decision-making, the actual decision-making approach a person uses is termed cognitive strategy. Okay, which is given a certain situation, that is what the individual uses to make a decision. All right, so the cognitive style and the cognitive strategy may not be the same all the time. Okay. Now, the relationship between cognitive style and cognitive strategy, even though they may not be the same, most of the time, individuals tend to use their dominant cognitive style as their cognitive strategy. So, for example, if you are a highly intuitive person, you have an intuitive cognitive style, then it's likely that regardless of the situation, you are more inclined to use your intuition to make decisions rather than analysis. Okay, and what research has found is that a mismatch between cognitive styles and cognitive strategy can actually sometimes trigger a negative reaction in the mind of the decision maker. Because if I'm an intuitive person, I like to make intuitive decisions, and if I'm forced to make analytical decisions, I don't. There is some tension. Okay, so so how is cognitive style and cognitive strategy associated with the entrepreneurial process? Okay. Now, what you see on this screen here is the theoretical model that I propose. Okay. And you see through three main blocks there. You have the entrepreneur cognitive style, either intuitive or analytical or cognitively versatile, which is, if a person who is high on both intuitive and analytical ability. And then you have the entrepreneur cognitive strategy, okay, which is the actual approach you use in a given situation. You can either use intuition or you can use a more analytical approach. And then you have the entrepreneurship process, okay, which, as we discussed earlier, you have opportunity exploration, which is the initial stage of the process, and then you have opportunity exploitation, which is the latter stage of the process, okay. And then, with my last proposition, I will discuss how cognitive versatility is related to entrepreneurial success, okay. So what I'm arguing here, especially when you consider cognitive style to cognitive strategy, the first three of my propositions, entrepreneurs who are inherently intuitive or analytical are expected to use their predominant cognitive style to make decisions during both phases of the entrepreneurship process. So if the entrepreneur is a predominantly intuitive person, they will use intuition in both opportunity exploration and exploitation. Likewise, if the entrepreneur is an analytical person, they will use analytical methods to make decisions in both opportunity exploration and exploitation. Okay, but then people or entrepreneurs who are cognitively versatile, all right, who have the ability to switch between modes and be high in both intuitive and analytical ability, those individuals, they will use the most effective decision making mode given the situation, all right. So since an intuitive style is argued to be more effective for opportunity exploration, they are likely to use intuition for opportunity exploration. And since analytical style is argued to be more effective for opportunity exploitation, they will use an analytical process for opportunity exploitation. All right. So unlike those who are intuitive or analytical, the people who are cognitively versatile will use the best approach given the circumstance. Okay. So the propositions that I have, proposition 1 is entrepreneurs who have an intuitive cognitive style will use an intuitive cognitive strategy in both the exploration and exploitation phases of the entrepreneurship process. And proposition 2 says entrepreneurs who have an analytical cognitive style will use an analytical cognitive strategy in both the exploration and exploitation phases of the entrepreneurship process. Okay? And proposition 3, entrepreneurs who are cognitively versatile will use an intuitive cognitive strategy in the exploration phase and an analytical cognitive strategy in the exploitation phase of the entrepreneurship process. Okay? And then you also see on the theoretical model, you have proposition 4, 5, and 6. Proposition 4 and 5 is related to is about the association between entrepreneurial cognitive strategy and the entrepreneurship process. Okay, and I will discuss those in the next couple of slides. So, with regard to proposition 4, what I argue is that intuition is more effective than analysis for opportunity exploration. And remember, opportunity exploration is the initial stage of the entrepreneurial process where an entrepreneur, identifies and decides on a venture to pursue. Okay. And what research has found is that intuition is linked to entrepreneurial qualities such as innovation and proactiveness. Intuition has a positive relationship with new product creativity, right? Innovation, proactiveness, new product creativity, those things are closely aligned with the exploration stage of the entrepreneurship process. Okay, and also what some research has found is that a rational decision culture has a negative effect on the relationship between intuition and new product creativity. Now, a rational decision culture is an analytical decision-making culture. So, a person who is in analytical decision-making culture, their, the relationship for a person who is in an analytical decision-making culture, their relationship between intuition and new product creativity is negatively impacted by that. Okay, so based on that, I propose that entrepreneurs who use an intuitive cognitive strategy rather than analytical cognitive strategy for opportunity exploration will be more effective during the opportunity exploration phase. And next, I argue that analysis is more effective than intuition for opportunity exploitation. Now, opportunity exploitation is the second stage of the entrepreneurship process. This is where the entrepreneur actually starts the business, manages resources, plans, and do those things to run the day-to-day operations of the business, right? So, even though some owners or managers are intuitive thinkers, research has found that individuals with an analytical thinking style run a more successful business. And also, individuals with an analytical cognitive style are more confident than people with an intuitive cognitive style about their ability to assess, evaluate, plan, and effectively use resources to manage an entrepreneurial operation. And those are all aspects of the exploitation phase of the process. Okay, so I argue with Proposition 5 that entrepreneurs who use an analytical cognitive strategy rather than an intuitive cognitive strategy for opportunity exploitation will be more effective during the opportunity exploitation phase. So how does all this impact entrepreneurial success? Okay, so I presented in Proposition 3 that an individual who is cognitively versatile will use intuition for opportunity exploration and use analysis for opportunity exploitation, and those two methods are found to be more effective for each of those phases of the entrepreneurship process, right? So consequently, cognitively versatile entrepreneurs, are expected to perform well in both phases of the entrepreneurship process. So Proposition 6 says, compared to those who are either intuitive or analytical, entrepreneurs who are cognitively versatile will be effective in both the opportunity exploration and opportunity exploitation phases of the entrepreneurship process. So I want to, leave you with some future research considerations as well. All right. So one thing that we can think about is how does entrepreneurial experience impact the relationship between cognitive style and cognitive strategy? So this is thinking about other individual factors that could impact the relationship between cognitive style and cognitive strategy. All right. Now, talking about entrepreneurial experience, some research has found a prior experience to have a positive impact on entrepreneurial ability and an entrepreneur's propensity to use either intuitive or analytical methods to recognize business opportunities. So it seems like, prior experience with entrepreneurial ventures does have an impact on what kind of strategy you use for entrepreneurship. Okay. And another thing that you can think about is what are some other contextual factors that impact the relationship between entrepreneurial cognition and the entrepreneurship process. There are various factors that could impact that, and market volatility, might be one of them, right? How does, individuals, regardless of their cognitive style, make decisions? What kind of cognitive strategy do they have in a volatile market as opposed to a stable market? Okay, so that's another thing to consider. All right, and then also there is a lack of evidence on the impact of cognition. Sorry, I forward the slide by mistake. So there is a lack of evidence on the impact of cognition on opportunity exploitation. Okay, a lot of research has been done on the impact of intuition on opportunity exploration, but there is not much research, empirical research that has been done on the impact of cognitive style on opportunity exploitation. So future research, should, look at empirical examinations on this particular area. Okay. And then also one of the limitations in the research related to cognition in general, and specifically related to cognition in entrepreneurship, is the research methods that we use to measure the cognitive process. Right, a lot of times, we use surveys and things like that, right, which are prone to recollection bias and hindsight bias, especially when you consider a process like intuition, which is a unconscious process. It's really difficult to assume that after a time has passed, a person would be able to think back about their process that they followed during a decision-making situation and accurately, relate to that process, right? So, new and more complex methods to measure the impact of cognition in entrepreneurial decision-making, I think, is required. Okay, and one of the examples is think aloud protocol analysis. Okay, so think aloud protocols use the concurrent verbalization technique, where the participants are required to continuously, verbalize their thought process while completing a task. Okay, and compared to retroactive accounts, where the participant must recall a past event, the concurrent verbalization technique allows the researcher to capture the actual thought process of the participants while completing the task, right? So a concurrent protocol analysis is not as affected by recollection bias or hindsight bias, and will enable the researcher to assess if the entrepreneur is using either an intuitive or an analytical decision-making process during the assigned task. Okay, and also there are other methods. Researchers can use neurosensory techniques such as eye tracking and facial expression analysis during an experimental design to look at what type of cognitive process entrepreneurs are using to make decisions. Okay, so lastly, a couple of practitioner implications. Okay, how is this model important to practitioners, right? As practitioners, as current and future entrepreneurs, I think it's very important that that those individuals understand how their cognitive style impact decision making, and how those decisions can either lead to entrepreneurial success or failure, right? So entrepreneurs must learn to assess their cognitive strategy. Okay, to ensure that they're using the right strategy for the right moment. Okay, for example, if you are a very intuitive entrepreneur, an entrepreneur who have an intuitive cognitive style, you know that for the opportunity exploitation phase, an analytical strategy has been found to be more effective. Right. So knowing that, and also knowing that you are more intuitive than analytical, perhaps learning to be a little bit more analytical will be useful, and also being able to employ people that have analytical mindsets will be useful. To take advantage of both the opportunity exploration and exploitation phases. Okay. And also when you consider building an entrepreneurial team, having complementary cognitive styles will be a huge advantage, where when you have people who are intuitive, and analytical, there you can take advantage of the strengths of both cognitive style, as well as minimize some of the weaknesses of both. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. I hope it was useful to you. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to email me at vinodvincent@clayton.edu. Thanks again, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the conference.